What's going on, everybody? My name is C4. Welcome back to the channel, and today we are here for Mock Draft 7.0, but a very important mock draft, an updated mock draft, because the first big wave of free agency has concluded. There's still probably 5 names that could sign, that could alter how you'd really handle a mock draft, but I feel pretty good. I mean, I felt real good with my last mock draft. A lot, I'm not going to say a lot, I'd say probably about 40% of the picks are the same, because I truly think there are some perfect fits for teams that aren't going to be reaches, that are going to be almost a BPA, as well as at a position in each. So I feel real good about where this mock draft's at. I've taken feedback that you guys have given me in the comment section. I've reached out on social media. I've reached out on subreddits to kind of get vibes of where fans are going. And I think ultimately, not a single human being is going to complain about this mock draft for their favorite team. I guarantee it. So without further ado, starting at pick number 1, last mock draft, I had the Titans going BPA and selecting Abdul Carter. I think this is a scenario, and we're not doing trades because I did that once, and literally the comments were a garbage. I swear to God, it was football terrorism for some certain fans by having some trades, having some fun, having the Pittsburgh Steelers trade out for a quarterback. How smart does that look now with your given quarterback situation? I do think it'd be kind of cool if they get Aaron Rodgers. Anyways, the Tennessee Titans had pick number 1. I have been going Abdul Carter, but I think of how they've handled free agency, I think it's got to be Cam Ward. I think you're not in this position at picking one. It's one of the two. It's either going to be Cam Ward or Abdul Carter if they can't trade back. I feel at least confident if we're doing this mock draft from pick, just doing it based off pick 1-1, regardless of what team holds it. I think Cam Ward will be the first overall pick, whether it is the Titans, whether it is a team like the Giants or the Raiders or whoever potentially trading up to that number 1 spot. Cam Ward at number 1, and for Tennessee, it makes sense. There's just no way you go into the season with what they have at quarterback. You can't roll it back again with Will Levis, and Cam Ward's still a good quarterback prospect. He's a first-round quarterback prospect every year. If you are grading him as far as like pure value, you're probably talking about a player that's in like the high teens, middle 20s, somewhere in that range. But every year, quarterbacks like this go high. And I'm going to use Bo Nix as an example. Bo Nix was like firmly a second-round caliber player, but he went in the first round, and look who's laughing now. Denver feels pretty dang optimistic that they got a quarterback that's capable of bringing them to the playoffs and maybe being a contender. I feel the same kind of vibes with Cam Ward ending up on the Tennessee Titans. Pick number 2, the Cleveland Browns. This is probably the toughest pick of the draft. Will they go quarterback? Will they not go quarterback? I think from a roster standpoint, the only way you deal with that Deshaun Watson situation is you have to have a quarterback that can elevate the program on a rookie contract, which would be Shedeur Sanders. I don't think they're going to do that. I think you have Russell Wilson potentially looming for the new quarterback. I think they go Abdul Carter. I think they're going to buy into the fact that at this number 2 spot, it's not a 1. You are not turning that Browns team around right away. So why not just get the best player available in the class? It's going to give you a terrifying pass rush, an undeniable pass rush in him and Myles Garrett, and you figure out the quarterback spot later. You either go Russell Wilson. Are they in on the Aaron Rodgers sweepstakes? Probably not, but let's assume they go Russ. Right? You get Russ for this year. You can probably next season look to get rid and offload that Deshaun Watson contract and swing again. But Russell Wilson will be good enough to keep this team not a liability on offense. And then you go out and you might have yourself a top 10 defense, top whatever. Jim Schwartz, great DC. And a guy and a duo of Abdul Carter and Myles Garrett could absolutely be the deciding factor at a lot of those close games that the Browns had a year ago. And couple wins go the other way. This is a team that, could be, if Russell Wilson just doesn't hurt them, maybe doesn't elevate them, maybe doesn't win them games, but you win your games with your pass rush and your defense. I think that's what they're going to do. At number 3, we have the New York Giants, and I have them selecting Shedeur Sanders, quarterback out of Colorado. I think this is going to be an act of desperation. In my head, for doing this mock draft, I have Russell Wilson going to the Browns, Aaron Rodgers going to the Pittsburgh Steelers. So the Giants are like, well, Brian Daboll, Joe Schoen, all those guys, they are fighting for their job. And this is your last Hail Mary to remain employed. They can get a quarterback, someone like Shedeur Sanders, who I think he's Bo Nix. I'm not saying that that's the pro comp, but I think draft comp is Bo Nix. Bo Nix was a second-round player, but quarterbacks always get overdrafted, and it worked out because it was the right situation. Shedeur Sanders, second-round caliber player, but he's absolutely the type of player that I do believe can change the culture. He's a culture-changing quarterback, and I think that's exactly what the Giants need. The Giants have the former coach of the year in Brian Daboll, who got the job because of what he was able to do and develop with Josh Allen in Buffalo. Get him a quarterback with some upside. You cannot deny, unless you're an outright hater, that Shedeur doesn't have some upside. So I think it is the Bo Nix of picks. If you did a redraft last year, how high does Bo Nix go? He definitely goes higher than when the Denver Broncos were picking. So I get very similar vibes, and I think this is an act of desperation for everybody there in New York to get something that could potentially turn the tide for that organization on the offensive side of the ball. And your only option to do that at pick number 3 would be taking the gamble of Shedeur Sanders. Number 4, we have the New England Patriots. This was, and it's kind of been a pick that I liked them for a minute now, is Travis Hunter. I think they're going to view Travis Hunter as a wide receiver. Bringing in Carlton Davis to pair with Christian Gonzalez at corner leads me to believe that from the vibes and all the reports that we're hearing out of the combine. A lot of teams, a lot more than I thought, have Travis Hunter as a wide receiver over corner. I think that if you're going to go with the whole hybrid, he's going to play both positions, you have to have him at corner, then you can sprinkle in some packages for him on the offensive side of the ball. But I think if you have him at wide receiver, you probably aren't going to dabble too much. Maybe in a pinch if someone gets hurt in game or something like that, but it's just so different from like a meetings and understanding the scheme and game plan perspective. Like, I don't think at a professional level, he's got to be that two-way player, and I don't think the Patriots believe he's a wide receiver first, that they're going to have him sitting in on defensive meetings preparing to play corner, lockdown outside corner. So there is obviously value in Travis Hunter playing both sides of the ball. He's truly, I think at minimum, he probably has the best engine out of any football player I've ever seen to be able to play the amount of snaps he does at the level that he does. But I truly think the Patriots are going to view him as a wide receiver and likely wide receiver 1 for Drake May. Number 5, we have the Jacksonville Jaguars. No one knows what they're doing. I literally was doing research on the Jag subreddit. No one knows. No fan there. Everyone wants to trade back. They're at that purgatory spot. 5 is going to be the purgatory spot. If you can't find maybe a quarterback slipping that you could trade back and get more picks, you kind of just have to go, I think, BPA, maybe in the Jags case, the safest player available, either selecting Mason Graham, the defensive lineman from Michigan. They need that help in the interior. Mason Graham is a safe player. It does seem like the more that comes out, you kind of feel less about maybe his ceiling, his perceived ceiling from before, but he seems like a guy that is kind of like the inverse of when they went Travon Walker over Aiden Hutchinson. You went with the traits and gambled on Travon Walker versus the guy that was more pro-ready, sure thing, it felt like, in Aiden Hutchinson. I think you're getting like the inverse of that. If you go with Mason Graham, you're getting a guy that probably has a very high floor. You're getting a guy that surprisingly lighter. In college, he was listed at 320, and I think he was, 305 at the combine. But you're getting a interior pass rusher that can play the run. Jags' run defense was absolute butt cheeks last year. It's going to give them great compliment. Travon Walker and Mason Graham are going to be outstanding against the run. Like, they're going to solve a lot of those issues. You can lend that Josh Hines Allen, get after the quarterback. I think it's just the safest pick for the Jacksonville Jaguars in this spot, assuming they can't find a way to trade down, and this is a mock draft with no trades. Number 6, we have the Vegas Raiders, and I'm going to go with what we did in our most recent mock draft and or rebuild. Both I had them going. T-Mac, Teddy-Roy McMillan, the wide receiver from Arizona, 6'5", 210. And if you're committing to Geno Smith, and all the reports is like they're going to rock with Geno for maybe more than just one season. He's not going to be a rental. He needs weapons. You need more weapons than just Brock Bowers and Jacoby Myers. T-Mac is a wide receiver 1. How good could he potentially be? Is he going to be able to consistently get separation? You have that little bit of risk that T-Mac is as stereotypical as the lunch pail, slot wide receiver white guy, or the, whatever you want to say, the dual threat quarterback. Is he going to be a running back? Well, that stereotype exists for the wide receivers that are built like McMillan, where it's just, you're 6'5", you're not a burner. So are you going to be able to get separation at the next level? It's like your Mike Evans, your Drake Londons that work out, but then you get your Mike Williams who are kind of in that purgatory. It is something that's almost always a concern, but I think he's underrated run after the catch ability for a big wide receiver, and I think he's absolutely a guy that's going to be able to not only win on the outside, give you jump ball ability, give you yards after the catch, give you a threat in the red zone. I think if you are committing to Geno Smith, the hot debate seems to be, do we go with Ashton Genty here? Do we get Pete Carroll, his Marshawn Lynch, his beast mode? I don't think that value's there for the Raiders. I think you do go offense, you do go skill position, but it is much harder to find a wide receiver that could potentially raise that offense up than it is to find a running back in a class that's particularly strong at running back, especially in like the second and third round. If you're in the second round and a Marion Hampton or Caleb Johnson or Judkins, the Ohio State guys are still there, you're laughing getting those guys. That is going to be two gigantic hitters for that offense. But in the first round, go wide receiver, get yourself a wide receiver 1. Number 7, we have the New York Jets, and I'm going to have them select Armand Membu, the offensive tackle from Mizzou, a riser. I think my last draft, I had him going like 11, I think, to the 49ers. But after that combine, at 331 pounds, testing as the biggest athletic freak on the offensive line, that's what's going to happen. And you look at the Jets right now, need a lot of things. But if you're committing with Justin Fields, you have your weapon in Garrett Wilson. You feel good about your run game. Your offensive line has some interesting pieces, but that right tackle spot is a major cause for concern. And when you have an athlete of the caliber of Membu, who's as strong and as goddamn dirty of a run mauler as you're going to get, this is going to have to be a team that's going to have to run the football. Okay? Be it Justin Fields being a dual threat, be it relying on Breece Hall and Braylon Allen a little bit, you're going to need to dominate them trenches to be able to run the football. And I think that right tackle spot at this number 7 pick is the biggest priority for the New York Jets to improve. Number 8, we have the Carolina Panthers. This is probably maybe my first I have them selecting Tyler Warren, the tight end out of Penn State. I looked at this as a team that last year for Bryce Young, they invested on the offensive line. Some pretty big contracts handed out there on the interior. And the wide receivers with T-Mac gone, I still think looking big picture, knowing that Mason Graham's off the board, knowing that Abdul Carter's not there, it's like, all right, now do we get the consolation prizes? You know, like last mock draft, I had them reaching for Shamar Stewart. I am not saying teams are probably going to be scared off of his lack of production, but I think that him being such an athletic freak and seeing how long it kind of took for Travon Walker to put it together, because the similarities are pretty evident between the two, I think that's going to kind of push Shamar Stewart down draft board. Still going to be a first-round pick, but I think, are you going to pick the consolation prize at maybe your position of need, or do you go out and get at that spot with Tyler Warren the single best player to help Bryce Young next season? Because Tyler Warren is going to be wide receiver number 1. That's going to be the go-to. He's going to be the chain mover. He's going to be the versatile player that can move all over the field, put him in the backfield. He can block. And I think at a top 10 pick, seeing the optimism around how Bryce Young played last year, I think the number 1 player that can improve your quarterback should be the pick at number 8. And for my money, that is Tyler Warren. Even though, faux pas, having a tight end go top 10, especially looking at where Brock Bowers went. I think Brock Bowers better prospect than Warren. But I think given the draft and there's no trade downs, Warren makes a lot of sense to the Panthers. Number 9, we have the New Orleans Saints. And I'm going to have them select Will Johnson, the corner from Michigan, after trading away Marshawn Lattimore, after failing to re-sign, I don't even know if they were really interested, Adebo. That is one of the worst-looking corner rooms in the NFL. All due respect to the Cookie Monster, Alante Taylor, who's more of a nickel. I think Will Johnson on the outside, his stock's kind of taking a little bit of hit. I don't know if he's going to test at his pro day, but assuming he does and he runs like a low 4.4, there you go. Tape doesn't lie. This is a guy and probably the only corner in this class that I think you can safely say has that outside, put him on an island type capabilities for a corner. And for the New Orleans Saints, you got to replace the corners that you just lost. That is easily, I think, the biggest position in need. And when your biggest position in need lines up with maybe the BPA on the board, you run that pick up. Number 10, we have the Chicago Bears. And I'm going to have the Bears select Ashton Genty, the running back from Boise State. Now, I'm going to put a little bit of spoiler. There may or may not be a Bears rebuild out tomorrow that features this scenario in the first round. I think when you look at Ben Johnson, when you look at how the Chicago Bears approach free agency by going all in on the offensive line, getting a new center, getting 2 new guards, you feel all right about Braxton Jones and Darnell Wright at the tackle spots. You feel good about their wide receivers. You feel good about their tight end. You feel optimistic about Caleb Williams at quarterback. You look at the defensive side of the ball. I think it's very similar to the Carolina Panthers in regards to if there was a big-time edge rusher that you loved, there was a big-time interior D lineman that you loved, you might be able to make a move there. Yeah, they did bring in Grady Jarrett and Odingabo from the Colts. But for the most part, when I'm looking at that team, I think the biggest game changer for a Ben Johnson, Jahmyr Gibbs, going from Jahmyr Gibbs, that 1-2 punch between him and Montgomery, you look at the Bears, you have DeAndre Swift. He can be a role player. Can he be the lead guy? Yeah. I say that as an Eagles fan where he was running behind the best offensive line in the NFL. He was good. Was he great? I don't know. Can he ever be great? I don't know. But can he be an excellent part of a running back rotation if you get an absolute game changer like Ashton Genty? Ashton Genty, a player that can absolutely be a Jahmyr Gibbs. Ashton Genty, underrated receiving back. 2 years ago when he was at Boise and not chasing the Barry Sanders record, he was getting, 50, 60 catches out of the backfield. He was a complete running back. This year, he's just like, I'm just chasing that record. Absolutely dominant. I think he would be an electrifying pick for the Chicago Bears, an absolute game changer for a team that they make that selection. I'm not going to say that they're going to be favorites in that division. That's probably the toughest division in football. I would be shocked if they don't find a way to make the playoffs next season. Pick number 11, we have the San Francisco 49ers. We're going to have them just get BPA. That's going to be Will Campbell, the lineman out of LSU. There's some debate whether or not with his historically short arms, is he going to be a tackle? Is he going to be a guard? I think probably you still find a way to make it work at tackle, but I think for a team like the 49ers that need tackle and or guard, if it's worst case scenario he's a guard, you're still pretty happy with that pick because he's going to plug in at one of the spots on that offensive line that they desperately need. I think that is a almost dream scenario there for the 49ers. Dallas Cowboys at pick number 12, and I'm going to select him, Jahdae Barron, the corner out of Texas. Daniel Jeremiah has him as a top 10 player in this class. Very versatile defender. The pro comp for him, which makes a lot of sense, is Brian Branch, who's an excellent defensive player for the Detroit Lions. Can play multiple positions. You can put him in the slot. You can play him at safety. I think you'd probably get by with Barron because he tested a lot better than expected at the combine. Play him on the outside. For the Philadelphia Eagles in particular, we had Isaiah Rodgers play outside. Played great reps for us on the outside. He got a nice little payday from the Vikings, but similar size. He was 5'10", 5'11", which is not your stereotypical outside corner size. But I think for the Dallas Cowboys, when you look at the uncertainty around Trevon Diggs, what's that long term? When you look at just that nickel spot, when you look at a guy that could play multiple positions in that secondary, I think that might be a little bit more valuable for the Dallas Cowboys than going, say, Matthew Golden, who is who I had them selecting in my last mock draft. Moving on to pick number 13, we have the Miami Dolphins, and I'm going to have them select Kelvin Banks, the lineman from Texas. I do think there's a chance Banks falls a little bit more. Didn't stand out at the combine from an athletic testing standpoint. And when there's kind of that log jam for all those linemen, the athletes, like the Membus, they start to kind of rise up a little bit because you're like, oh, shit. Well, I mean, that's like undeniable athleticism. Banks, on the other hand, is kind of in that Will Campbell debate of like a little bit shorter arms. Is he going to be a guard? Is he going to be a tackle? I think very similarly to the San Francisco 49ers, the Miami Dolphins are in a spot where it's like, we need linemen. If Banks can be the successor to Terran Armstead, great. If he has to slide into guard and just be a great guard, they ain't too mad about that as well. So I think best of both worlds, a safe pick for the Miami Dolphins, whether it works out or not at tackle. Number 14, we have the Indianapolis Colts. I'm going to have them select tight end. It's a boring pick, but it makes so much sense. Colson Loveland out of Michigan. Arguably, and there's a debate that he might be the best pure route runner, regardless of wide receiver or tight end in this year's draft class. Now, it's tough because Michigan has never really had a great passing offense, so he's been very limited, but the flashes and sparks have been there. For me, he reminds me a lot of Zach Ertz, and if you're getting fringe, I don't want to say Zach Ertz is a Hall of Famer, but he got a couple NFL records. You know what I'm saying? If you can get that, I mean, I've heard some murmurs as well when I was looking around, like, are the Colts going to be interested in a potential Dallas Goedert trade from the Philadelphia Eagles? That could be an interesting landing spot, but I think tight end is a huge need, especially if you're going with either Anthony Richardson or Danny Dimes at quarterback. You need that safety net. It makes life on the quarterback so much easier, and I think Loveland would be a great fit there at 14. Either of the tight ends, Loveland or Warren, make a lot of sense. As boring and as kind of redundant as that mock pick has come for the Colts, it just makes so much sense. Number 15, we have the Atlanta Falcons. And I'm going to have them select a pick that, at one point in time, the very first mock draft I did this, and everyone hated it. And now it's almost like the consensus dream pick for the Falcons. Jalen Walker, the edge rusher from Georgia. Yes, you are gambling on upside in traits, but the upside in traits look absolutely undeniable with him. He's another one of those Georgia vicious pass rushers that can give you a little bit of versatility. You can have him get creative with them on the defensive side of the ball, but is another year. It feels like the last 3 years. It's just been Falcons need pass rush. Falcons need pass rush. And I think the best pass rush available for them that fits their scheme would be Mr. Walker. Number 16, we have the Arizona Cardinals. And I had them taking this player in my last mock draft. Love the fit. They get Josh Sweat in free agency. Good get. But I think they need to improve that front three a little bit. I'm going to have them get the former 5-star recruit, Walter Nolan, on the defensive line. I think he's, in comparison to what Jonathan Gannon had in Philadelphia. That's a little Milton Williams. We just saw Milton Williams get $26 million a year on average from the New England Patriots. You get a lot of Milton Williams. That would be my pro comp for Walter Nolan. Maybe not as S-tier of an athlete as Milton Williams was. Milton Williams was, almost one of a kind for the testing numbers that he was able to put up, like a 9.9 RAS, which is unheard of for that spot. But Walter Nolan has undeniable traits and an excellent pass rush. I think there's room to grow for him as a run defender and a complete defensive tackle. And this is kind of like some people have Walter Nolan going around this range. Other people have him falling late. Some word on the street is that maybe there's some maturity issues and stuff like that that could cause him to fall a little bit. But I think if you are the Arizona Cardinals, Gannon's got to know from Philadelphia, sometimes those maturity issues you'll figure it out when they become a professional. This guy's a great player, and maybe he'll take those traits from Howie Roseman and how the Eagles draft and say, screw it, we're getting the best player available, and we'll trust that he'll mature, and all that other stuff will sort itself out. Number 17, we have the Cincinnati Bengals, who sounds like they might be spending $1 trillion on 2 wide receivers soon, which will make the fan base happy. They need some help here. And number 17, I have them going a player that we just recently used in a Bengals rebuild, James Pierce Jr., the pass rush out of Tennessee. With it looking like Trey Hendrickson is going to be the way out on a trade, let's go get the guy that stole the show at the Combine for the pass rushers. Now, weird testing in a way, because the 40-yard dash was excellent. I thought the drills were excellent. I thought he was the most fluid and smoothest athlete that was out there during the pass rush drills, but then he had like a weirdly terrible vert that it does measure explosiveness. It just was one of those things, didn't really make a whole lot of sense. But James Pierce has been one of the, if not the most consistent pass rusher in the SEC. The pressures are usually off the chart, and if you're going to be replacing and trying your best to replace Trey Hendrickson, who is one of the best sack specialists in the NFL last year, you can get someone that has a similar ceiling in James Pierce Jr. at, a tenth of the price of what Hendrickson is going to cost the Bengals. Pick number 18, we have the Seattle Seahawks, and I'm going to have them select Matthew Golden, the wide receiver from Texas. Now, the kind of buyer beware of Matthew Golden is what? He ran that 4.3 at the I think before that, you look at Matthew Golden, you saw a guy that was pretty polished as a receiver. Isaiah Bond was the hot name from the Texas wide receivers, but as last season kind of played out in college football, Matthew Golden was the guy who was like, this guy is a pretty reliable set of mitts. He can get open. Some nice, ridiculous highlight reel catches on the reel. And then he just goes and runs, 4.3? 4.340? Now, that 4.340 doesn't necessarily show up on tape, which is, and it has happened before, but all it's going to take is the right scheme, the right kind of coach to utilize that speed a little bit better and maybe be able to close that gap between, test speed and play speed. But he absolutely is going to be a first-round pick at wide receiver. And I think with the lack of speed now in that Seahawks, you went from Tyler Lockett, who still had some good juice. You had DK, who was height, weight, speed personified. I think the speed of Matthew Golden to give Sam Darnold a weapon there makes a whole lot of sense for the Seattle Seahawks versus, say, maybe reaching for a lineman, which has been a popular mock draft pick before. We have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers at pick number 19. And I'm going to have them select Donovan Ezeraku, the edge rusher from Boston College. Now, I heard some murmurs that they've been interested in. They're doing their homework on him. I think dog, dude. Absolute dog. Now, he tested well. He didn't test like a freak of nature, anything like that, but he tested pretty damn good. Like, enough that it's not a red flag, his physical ability. When I watched Boston College, and I was watching, the game that stood out the most to me was Boston College against Florida State. I'm going to get a Gators fan. I was kind of enjoying the downfall of Florida State last year. I remember I watched that game, and Ezeraku was so dominant. I was like, who the hell is this dude on Boston College? Was like unblockable. Was in DJU's face almost every single play. And you look at the stats, his body of work last year was outstanding. First-round caliber player. He's in that bubble of potentially sneaking in the first round. I think he's going to be a guy that Todd Bowles and company will fall in love with for the Bucs to go out and improve their pass rush. Denver Broncos at pick number 20. I'm going to have them get one of my favorite players in the class. I'm going to have them select Omarion Hampton, the running back out of North Carolina. I think the Broncos have done a solid job. When you look at their roster right now, not a lot of glaring needs. I think running back is one in particular. Maybe they don't love the idea of replacing one North Carolina running back with Javonte Williams and another one with Omarion Hampton, but Hampton's a different animal than Javonte Williams. I think something that maybe wasn't appreciated enough at the college level was the tandem of Javonte Williams and Michael Carter, right? That was his name? Could be. There was two running backs at North Carolina that were an excellent 1-2 punch. I think they worked off another. And then when you went Javonte Williams and you expect him just to be the guy, you're left a little bit underwhelmed with what he has been able to kind of carve out for his career in the NFL. But Omarion Hampton, dog. Give him 300 touches. He will carry the load. He will be that game changer, that missing X factor that it appears that Sean Payton has been very public saying that that's what he wants to get, the Joker or whatever the hell for his offense. Hampton can be that guy. Now, maybe he's not the perfect, like if you're looking for that Alvin Kamara type, but I don't think there's any issues with him catching the football in the backfield, and he is absolutely a first-round caliber running back for the Denver Broncos. Pittsburgh Steelers at pick number 21. I'm going on the assumption that Aaron Rodgers signs. That is going to be the new quarterback. So I'm going to have them go on the defensive side of the ball and select Kenneth Grant, the nose tackle from Michigan. I think you could probably, I don't know if it's going to be, a guarantee, but I think there's some other pieces on that D-line right now that you can probably move around and have Kenneth Grant just be your outright nose tackle. I think Keanu Benton, move him. Maybe you have him flex out eventually, maybe to be the guy. You can have Benton on one end, and you have Grant in the middle, and that can kind of be that rotation going forward whenever Cam Hayward decides to hang him up. But I think Kenneth Grant, 330 pounds. They just don't have that body type on that front three. Dog, I'm very interested to see the testing numbers. He was on Bruce Feldman's freak list at a nose tackle weight. Like, I'm not necessarily saying that he's going to be Dontari Poe testing numbers. There's a throwback for you. But I think it's going to be, if we're talking RAS, expectations, he's going to have a high 8 RAS, maybe even a 9 RAS as a 330-pounder at D tackle, and justify and maybe remind everybody, because he hasn't tested yet, and get that height built back up for a very, very solid run defender. And it's one of those things, it's not necessarily a hot take. I'm not outright going to say it, but it wouldn't be shocking if in like 5 years down the line, Kenneth Grant might be the better pro than, say, Mason Graham. I don't think Mason Graham's going to bust. That's not necessarily tearing his stock down. I think that's just the upside of Grant if he kind of shows off that athleticism that is pretty apparent on tape. Pick number 22, we have the LA Chargers. And I'm going to have them go on the defensive line. They're going to select Derek Harmon out of Oregon. He tested better than expected. Michigan State transfer, goes to the Oregon Ducks. Very productive last year. Very impressive at the combine. He definitely stood out, certainly amongst a not super athletic defensive tackle group. And I think when you're looking at the Chargers defense, however, I think you view Harmon as more of an interior, like a pass rusher, more than you would a run defender, even though he's a D lineman. And when you're moving on from Bosa, you're going to be hoping that like Tui Pelotu could step up in that role. You got Khalil Mack back on a 1-year rental. You could consider edge rusher. Like if you wanted like a Shamar Stewart or Michael Williams, you could and get younger there. But I think you might get a little bit more contributions from Derek Harmon if you adjust him and plug him on that front three and get him to part of that rotation as a rookie. The Green Bay Packers are next, up at pick number 23. I'm going with the same pick I had in my last mock draft, Maxwell Hairston. Anytime there's a player that I kind of feel like is undervalued, and then they go at the combine and run the fastest 40-yard dash, I'm in, man. Hairston is a productive SEC corner, has, 6 feet tall, 4.2 speed, looks like Jair Alexander's on the way out for the Green Bay Packers. I know Packer fans are screaming for wide receiver. Yeah, maybe. You're not going to probably draft one. That's how that front office runs. But even if you were and you're considering like Burton or Ibuka, I don't know if, those guys are needle movers. I don't know if those guys are better than Jaden Reed and, Romeo Dobbs. Like, what's the discrepancy there? But if you trade Jair Alexander, that drop-off is huge. So I think that if they do make that trade, they're kind of putting themselves in a hole. That corner that's already a priority might have to become automatically top priority. And I love Hairston going in the first round. Pick number 24, we have the Minnesota Vikings. I'm going to have them select Tyler Booker, the guard from Alabama. I think retooling that trenches a little bit for the Minnesota Vikings makes sense. I think that left guard spot could be wide open. Booker, not great testing, but tape don't lie. Vicious mauler. This guy is like, if he tested well, he might go like closer to top 10. But the fact, like, that's kind of like the bounce of like the tape. As long as he can hang with the speed of the NFL, which is a question mark, but the power, his build, prototype build for the inside, how vicious he is, I think you're getting, at minimum, a very high floor, Pro Bowl ceiling type guard. And when you are the Minnesota Vikings, when you have a brand new quarterback in Mr. McCarthy, being able to have and be able to rely on that offensive line to give him a fighting chance to figure it out and go through the growing pains in his true rookie season now, going into year 2, I think that's probably a pick you have to strongly consider at 24. Not a sexy pick, but it might be the most productive pick. Now we're moving on to the Houston Texans at number 25, and I'm going to have them select Luther Burden, the wide receiver from Missouri. Tank Dell probably going to miss a lot of next year, right? I think that's almost a lock. Stephon Diggs heading to free agency. Right now you got Nico Collins at wide receiver. You got my boy John Mechie. They just never want to give that guy a chance, unfortunately. So you look at Luther Burton, coming off a down year at Mizzou. This was 1 year ago. He's probably going closer to top 10. So the fact that you're getting at 25 in relation to his stock over the last 2 years of college football is a good value pick. He's a very versatile player. You can line up in the slot. You can line him up in the backfield. You can line him up out wide. You just do a lot of things you can think. Ultimately, I think he's a complement to what you have in Nico Collins and his ability to stretch the field. And I think it will give something over the middle, underneath, easy throws. It's not just all going to have to be force-fed to like Dalton Schultz, if that's kind of how you want to view that role. Moving on to number 26, we have the LA Rams. And I'm going to stick them at wide receiver and get Emeka Egbuka. Fairly easy pick. Seems like a fan favorite pick for the Rams at this spot after moving on from Cooper Kupp. There's a very safe, maybe not the highest ceiling, but a very safe, likely day one starter. He's very pro-ready wide receiver that can plug and play in the slot. You don't have to worry about it, right? You can figure out where you're going to want to utilize Tutu Atwell, who just got paid a little bit. It's going to be the Puka Nacua show as your wide receiver one, but I think Egbuka, pro-ready day one starter to help a Rams team that is very close and in the discussion for being the best team in the NFC and probably the biggest competition, in my opinion, going into next year for my beloved Philadelphia Eagles. Pick number 27 for the Baltimore Ravens. This is such a Ravens pick. Shamar Stewart, the freak of nature, developmental edge rusher out of Texas A&M. These are just the players the Baltimore Ravens love. Your Ojabos, your Oways, your Shamar Stewarts. Now, this is having him fall significantly lower than I had him in my last mock draft. I had him going at number 8 to Carolina in my last mock draft. Maybe that was just clouded judgment from the combine. I think the production will harm him a little bit. His production, if you look at just what he's been able to do, you're just still thinking like that's probably a second round production. But then when you put up like all-time type combine numbers, you're going to push up into the first round. I wouldn't be shocked if he goes maybe even considerably higher than 27. But I do think there's going to be some teams that are going to see some guys that might be more pro-ready right away. And they don't have the luxury of taking a guy that is going to need some development. He's going to need some refining. You're not going to be able to throw him in the starting lineup right away. But a team like Baltimore just loves these guys. They're going to be like, all right, you're going to be part of a rotation, and then hopefully in a year or two, you're going to be dominating in a day one start. It's just what the Ravens do. It fits their MO. Pick number 28, we have the Detroit Lions. Thought a little bit about this. I'll say, right, originally, I had them going Mike Green. I think he's going to fall in the first round. If you don't know about Mike Green, there's off-the-field concerns. Allegedly, domestic violence thing in high school. Allegedly, a second domestic violence thing that had him leave Virginia Tech to go to Marshall. I think, today's, I'd hate to say all this and have like the Eagles draft him, but I think he's going to fall. So I originally had them go Mike Green. If we're going to pivot, I'm going to have this like Jahad Campbell. It says linebacker, but a lot of really smart people, a lot smarter than me, have him moving to an edge role. Tested excellent. If you test him and you put his athletic testing next to some of the top edge rushers, he's right there. You look at how he played at Alabama. Very similar, kind of like Zach Bond for the Philadelphia Eagles. He's a popular guy in the last couple mock drafts for my Eagles. I've had him going there. I'd love Philly to get him. But I think the plan is have him just kind of be that hybrid. You play a little linebacker. Like, who's that dude there? You had Derek Barnes, I think. Derek Barnes. I believe he rushed the passer and was kind of off-ball, that little hybrid for Purdue. You just get a infinitely better athlete. And I think long-term, I would view him and view the selection as he's a pass rusher. Maybe not an outright edge rusher. Maybe he's not going to get his hands in the dirt and play on the other side of Aiden Hutchinson all the time. But I think ultimately you're going to move him around the field and utilize his pass rushing ability, which is what Detroit needs to get on that defense. Pick number 29, we have the Washington Commanders. I'm going to select Mykel Williams, the edge rusher out of Georgia. Now, it's a little bit of a projection, somewhat similar to like Shamar Stewart. He tested at his pro day. I think it was like a 4.6, which, isn't along the lines of some of these freaky testing numbers we've seen from Georgia Bulldogs over the years. But he has undeniable traits. Prototypical height, weight, speed, enough speed. His length is outstanding for an edge rusher. A little bit of a slow burn for the Commanders, who are kind of shifting into that win now, obviously with the Laramie Tunsil and Deebo Samuel trade. But I don't think you have to just go all in, all now on every single thing they do this offseason. I think maybe he's taking a step back and getting a developmental player with Williams, who has a very high ceiling to be a double-digit sack getter in the NFL. Could present great value at pick 29 in the first round. Number 30, we have the Buffalo Bills. This one was a tough one. You have Starks and Manwari. I'm gonna be honest. I went on to like the Bills subreddit. And I was like, who are they talking about? They're talking about safety because safety is kind of a need for Buffalo. Is it Starks that they're talking about, or is it Emanwari? And like more people blame this on the Bills subreddit. We're gassing up Nick Emanwari after the combine, where he put up absolutely ridiculous numbers. I think you view him as like a DB. It'd be, I don't want to say unrealistic. He's never played any linebacker, but he's like bigger than Terrell Bernard. Like who's, you know what I'm saying? Like he's as big as like Matt Milano. He's as big as a linebacker. So like, is someone that has taken project players like Sean McDermott. Greg Rousseau was an absolute project player. And what, he just got paid, almost $100 million? Ed Oliver was a little bit of a project player. A little bit of a miscast. Is Ed Oliver going to be a true D tackle? They figured it out. Ed Oliver's a really nice player. So I feel like someone like Emanwari, who has undeniable athletic traits, and in comparison to Malachi Starks, they're pretty much different species. Malachi Starks is a good athlete. Emanwari is an elite athlete. I think the versatility there, you can line him up at nickel, box safety. Do you have him be kind of like that little sub linebacker? Like, there's just so many different ways that if McDermott falls in love with the traits, he could just be like your joker on the defensive side of the ball. Have him play a bunch of different positions, utilize that raw, insane athleticism. I think it's a very interesting pick for the Buffalo Bills. So, I'm putting that. This pick is officially sponsored by the Buffalo Bills subreddit. Now we're moving on to number 31. And we're going to have the Kansas City Chiefs. They're going to select a man who could very well be the top tackle when all is said and done in this draft class. Josh Simmons out of Ohio State had a pretty rough injury last season, ended his year at Ohio State. But as far as ceilings are concerned, he has as high of ceiling as any tackle in the league. And protecting Patrick Mahomes after that diabolical performance by that offensive line in the Super Bowl has to be priority number one. And I think this is a classic. And if this pick didn't happen, right? Like, everyone's look, oh, you got Mike Green, classic Eagle pick. You got Malachi Starks, oh, classic, he falls with the Eagles. I'll be honest, when I was like doing this, like I think if I'm trying to almost act like the Eagles, I think Simmons would be the pick for the Philadelphia Eagles. That'd be our Lane Johnson successor, new enrollee to Stelton. You don't have to rush him out there. I think when you look at the Kansas City Chiefs, they just overpaid a lot of money for like a fringe starting tackle from the 49ers. Every Chiefs fan is just assuming that like Sui Madia is going to take over for Joe Thuney. Like that offensive line is not in a great spot. So I think if you are here at 31, I think you need to prioritize the offensive line. You could go Gray Zabel. That'd be another runner-up. His versatility is very interesting because he can play pretty much everywhere on the line. Some people think he'll be a tackle. That's where he played North Dakota State. Some people think he'll be a guard. That's where he played North Dakota State. Some people think he can slide into center. I think that could be a safer pick. And like Andy Reid, historically, I mean, back here to Philadelphia, he'll take absolutely anybody. Doesn't care what school you come from. Connor Lee could also make a lot of sense here. But I think ultimately for the Chiefs, go for a swing on a tackle that in 2-3 years' time could be regarded as the best tackle in this year's class. And we're finishing up with the Philadelphia Eagles. They could do the meme thing and just get the character concern value pick. But for me, I think after the trade of Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, as much as I would just love this Eagles team to fully commit to the Canadian Sidney Brown, I think they're going to be like, well, you can still get Sidney Brown on the field, but we're going to go with Malachi Starks, the safety out of Georgia, whose stock's falling just a little bit. I think out of the combine, the fact that Emanwari tested as well as he did kind of indirectly hurts his stock a little bit, right? He's coming off a little bit of a down year from Georgia. 2 years ago, he was a top 10 pick. He was going to maybe break the mold and bring that value back to safeties in the draft. This year, he was fine. He was solid for the Georgia Bulldogs. So it's kind of, what are you getting? There's a little bit of an unknown, which I think could have him fall a little bit in the draft. But for the Philadelphia Eagles that just absolutely love the Georgia Bulldogs, it just makes the most sense here that, like, you go down, we get, you never have enough players. So if we have Reed Blankenship, who, as we stand right now, there is uncertainty. He's not under a long-term contract extension. It's assuming that that's going to come. But you trade away Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. You have Sidney Brown, who has a lot of potential, who could absolutely be a fan favorite with his tenacity and his big play hit style. I don't know. As much as I would love Sidney Brown to become a starter as a Canadian, okay? Vic Fangio, I think, hated how undisciplined Chauncey Gardner-Johnson was. The amount of plays that you can see, Vic Fangio, you need to play within a structure. That's why it works so well. The communication on that defense, being able to get everyone on the same page, being at the right place where you need to be, is how it works. And how many times early in the season, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson was maybe the worst player on the Eagles defense. He was missing tackles left, right, center, missing assignments left, right, center. He tightened it up down the stretch. But like even when he made his best plays, he had 6 interceptions. I'd say 2 to 3 of those, he was just straight up stealing the pick from like Quinyon Mitchell. It was very much like he was improvising. That might not work. I think if you are looking at Sidney Brown, that might be the downside. Sidney Brown wants to play at 1,000 miles an hour every single play. That is not conducive to what I think Vic Fangio wants in a starter. That's why I think Sidney Brown was constantly overlooked. When Reed Blankenship missed time, when Chauncey Gardner-Johnson got ejected, it was Tristan McCollum who stepped up. So you need someone that can play within that structure. And I think Malachi Starks, during that combine, while he might not have tested as well as Nick Emanwari, during the drills, during the pro day that he just had, like, outstanding. 10 out of 10, blue chip, everything about him was ticking all the boxes for that safety. And I think he would be a perfect fit for that Vic Fangio defense. So there you go, fellas. That is a first little wave of free agency mock draft. Would love to hear what you guys have to say about my pick for your favorite team. Let me know in the comment section below. As always, your first time stopping by, don't be afraid to hit that subscribe button. Smash the like button if you enjoyed it. Until next time, it's your boy C4 saying peace, I love you. Have a good one.